Good afternoon, it's Monday the 4th of April 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. And we will be joined by live video link by Kevin Edwards from South Wales, who's going to be talking, amongst other things, about what's happening with the Tata Steel plant. Well, weather, pretty appalling, really. It's raining very heavily, we know, in South Wales. Rhyl is apparently not too bad. Plymouth is grey, rainy, cold. I think we'll leave it there, shall we, Mike?
Yes, it's not hot.
It's not hot.
Unlike what seems to be going on with press conferences in Washington. Now, of course, David Cameron was in Washington to take part in the nuclear summit there. Well, the Mirror here reporting that he was losing his rag, ranting at the press. Now, of course, he has tried in the recent past to regulate the press and failed miserably. But just to quote one line here, the Mirror says, "Grumpy David Cameron lost his rag and launched an astonishing attack at Britain's media during a bad-tempered, red-faced tirade." What's going on here? He's clearly under a bit of pressure.
I think the simple thing is, Mike, he's being asked questions. He doesn't know anything himself. He's being put in a position where he can't answer, and therefore you're getting the aggression. I think this is the wheels coming off the wagon, the bunker mentality.
Well, we may have some more to say about that shortly.
Okay, well, if David Cameron was getting pretty hot under the collar, it was nothing compared to a conversation I had with this organisation this morning. It's Forces TV. I simply phoned up to ask them about this particular article, which they'd posted, Satanism in the Royal Navy. It's flanked by cartoons. And we'd had a number of concerned individuals saying to us, why is this organisation promoting Satanism? Well, my goodness, a very abrupt gentleman, didn't want to speak to me, didn't want to give me his name, didn't want to justify what they were doing, didn't want to understand what questions I did have. And we're now waiting for the chief executive to make some comment for us. But of course, it's not just Forces TV. Here's the Mirror. This was an article where they were talking about Satanism coming into the army. This isn't a cartoon. This is not a joke. This is the state of Britain's military today. And of course, this is being promoted by our politicians. Meanwhile, real defence, of course, is crumbling. And here's the Mail pointing out that the Royal Navy is in such a pitiful state that it hasn't got sufficient manpower to keep ships at sea, even modern ships, Type 45 destroyer, on screen here. And we've also got HMS Lancaster, apparently that is in Portsmouth but doesn't go to sea anymore. And we're just being told that the military hasn't got the manpower, can't organise itself. There's doom, gloom and breakdown.
They don't seem to be able to fix their engines.
Can't fix their engines, Mike, because David Cameron's government has got rid of all the extremely experienced NCOs, principally the engineers that keep things working. These are the critical people that keep the armed forces going. Got rid of those. But we can bring in the Satanists.
Do you think this is because the atmosphere within the Navy is so toxic at the moment that people are leaving, or is it they're being sacked because of cuts?
It's everything, Mike. People are leaving because the atmosphere is toxic. People are leaving because they're being overworked. So, of course, fewer people you have doing the job, the harder they work. And, of course, the government over the years has been paying huge bonuses to make sure that people who think they can get on to better things are going to leave. Why is all this happening? Well, of course, we'll just bring in this slide. We've shown this before. We get a clue from Mr. Trump, who says that NATO is now obsolete and expensive. It doesn't have the right countries in it to tackle terrorism, and they're going to have to adjust. So what we should be watching out for is where David Cameron is really going, which is the new EU military structure. So Britain's armed forces deliberately dismantled in order to squeeze the remainder into a pitiful ragtag of European military interests. Well, if that's the state of the armed forces, no doubt David Cameron is rubbing his hands in glee, but he should also be rubbing his hands because, well, this lady is clearly doing her job. Let's have a look at Justice Goddard because she has now announced that, here we are, that the Goddard inquiry will not ignore false abuse claims. So what she said, well, she said this: the public inquiry into child sexual abuse will not ignore the damage done to prominent people who were falsely accused. And in an article in The Observer, she stated it must strike a balance between the rights of the accusers and the accused. So here she is drifting her remit to protect the rich, the powerful, the politicians, all the people that the child abuse victims are pointing a finger at in the first place. And Goddard is just going to start the smoothing of the waters.
I don't remember this being in her terms of reference.
Well, I never saw it in her terms of reference, Mike, but of course this is a classic case of operating outside her authority, which is you don't take notice of terms and reference, you just get on and do what you do. So the woman who said that child abuse in Lambeth, as just one example, was on an industrial scale, that paedophiles had infiltrated the child protection services, she is apparently investigating the whole country, and she's going to help protect people who've been accused by victims. Bring in more children is clearly the answer.
Yes, so this is a Sun expose covered by ITV News here. Child survivors of the Nepal earthquake are being sold in the UK, this is according to the Sun. They're saying that youngsters as young as 10 are being sold for just £5,250 by black market gangs operating in the Punjab in India. And this is according to the Sun, as I say. Theresa May said that child trafficking is a truly abhorrent crime, and she urged the National Crime Agency to investigate the newspaper's claims. She said no child anywhere in the world should be taken away from their home and forced to work in slavery. That's why we introduced the landmark Modern Slavery Act last year. What's it doing is the question I would ask. And then she went on to say, which included enhanced protections for potential child victims of slavery and sentences up to life imprisonment for those found guilty. We encourage the Sun to share its disturbing findings with the police and National Crime Agency so that it can be covered up. Well, she didn't say that, but that's pretty much tantamount to it. Well, I just want to highlight once again the fact that Tim Farron, leader of the Liberal Democrat Party, of course, has been calling incessantly for unaccompanied children to be brought over to the UK from Syria. My point was that this is a case of out of the frying pan into the fire. I asked Mr. Farron if he'd be able to guarantee these children's safety as they grow up, and apparently not, because he's not willing to answer the questions put by me or put by any. I know that another number of other people have written to him asking for comment, and he refuses to comment on this. So he's basically just saying, bring these children to Britain; they'll be perfectly safe. Whereas, Brian, you and I know very well that children disappear in the care system in this country. They're abused, they're trafficked, and this story from Nepal just highlights it. Yeah.
Well, perhaps we can ask for our viewers to assist on this. Mr. Farron is sitting warm and cosy in his office, doesn't want to answer the questions. Would it be possible for more people to get those emails, Twitter, letters going, polite and reasonable as always, but to ask the key questions of Mr. Farron and other similar members of Parliament as to what they're actually doing to protect children? Of course, silence to this sort of communication gives us a very firm answer in its own right, and that is that if they don't care, and we know which side they're on. But if they're not challenged, of course, they get away with it. So I'm going to say, could you help us by upping the volume of communication to Mr. Farron so that we get an answer from him?
We could start off by sharing this little article that's on my Facebook page. Anybody wants to find it, you can find it on my Facebook page. Share that out and get lots of people to ask these questions.
Indeed. Well, this is a good point to bring in Kevin Edwards because, of course, Kevin has been heavily involved in trying to combat child stealing over many years. Kevin, have we got you?
Hi, Brian. Hi, Mike. How are you doing?
Yes, fine. Thank you very much for joining us. Kevin, what's your comments really on that report of Goddard and let's bring more innocent young children into Britain?
Well, it's absolutely unbelievable, isn't it? They're not going to let away people, they say, in authority that's been falsely accused. And yet the evidence, Brian, again, is overwhelming. The agenda is just basically sickening what's going on with children in this country. You're getting 2,000 children a month, I believe it is, now being taken into care in the United Kingdom, most of them from perfectly good children, purely for cash, with adoption ranging from about £60,000. We need to sort this out. It is coming more and more into the public domain that people are picking up on this, but it's just absolutely disgusting. Anybody of a rational, sensible, humane mind, just, all I can do, Brian, is shake my head.
Kevin, just give us a very brief update, if you can, on the Linda Lewis case, because I know that things are continuing to move in South Wales. You've got Beth Jenkins still involved, and this whole case has now been taken inside the Welsh Government. What is the latest?
Well, it's moving on slowly, Brian, but unfortunately we seem to be running into brick walls. We're deliberately being obstructed now by the courts and the Labour Party in South Wales and in Neath Talbot County Borough Council. As we correctly have said on many occasions, the injunction that was taken out in 2009, basically a gagging order against anybody speaking out against the criminal acts that had been committed by Neath Talbot Council and the Welsh Assembly Government, was declared void ab initio in June 2014. Now, everybody seems to have accepted that, apart from the judge, who we've now put in 3 letters to him, giving the reasons and evidence as to why everything is void. Now, in law, it is void. There is no question to that. Although within the Welsh Assembly Government, Labour Party ministers and Labour Party politicians are deliberately obstructing Beth Ann Jenkins. They blocked her on the 23rd of September last year from raising Linda Lewis' case in plenary and on Senedd TV, which is the Welsh Assembly TV channel. This was a cynical ploy in that Beth Ann had had her question tabled before the Welsh Assembly Government for 2 weeks. But on the morning of the 23rd, 4 Welsh Labour Assembly members, which includes David Rees, who was Linda's Assembly member in Port Talbot, Carwyn Jones, the First Minister, Gwenda Thomas, the Deputy Minister for Social Services, and, a rather unknown chap called Mike Hedges, who'll do anything for a couple of headlines, petitioned the presiding officer, which is the equivalent of the Speaker, and said that there is an injunction on this case and Beth Ann Jenkins cannot talk about it. Now, that's probably the most dirty, underhand tactics that I've ever come across in my life, based on the fact, Brian, that perhaps it's now time to let the cat out of the bag. David Rees, the Welsh Labour Assembly member for Aberavon, when he first got involved in Linda Lewis's case, he accepted 100% that there was no injunction in place, and for a short time he actually continued to do his job. Now, he did write, Brian, I'm sure you'll remember this, to David Michael, the head of legal services at Neath Talbot Council, and got a reply back stating that in 1998, when Linda Lewis's daughter was kidnapped from America from a sick children's hospital, Neath Talbot Council applied for no orders in America. Now, David Rees at the time did his job, and he accepted and he agreed that no injunction was in place. Now, when he discovered this, and this went back off to the Welsh Assembly Minister, First Minister Carwyn Jones, he backed away. He was told to back away or whatever, I don't know. But since then, he's been missing, and we've basically dropped him. But it's very, very confusing that to start with, he could actually get information because he recognised that no injunction was in place. But he was the one in September last year who led a delegation of Labour Assembly members into the presiding officers in the Welsh Assembly Government to stop Beth Ann Jenkins speaking about it.
Kevin, it's remarkable. I then pause because I'm always lost for words, or increasingly lost for words. But we've got government covering up criminal activity within public authorities and they're prepared to use every devious, dirty trick to do so. Just very quickly, 10-second answer, please. Where do you see the case going now? What are you going to try and do now to get the truth out?
Well, we've written again, as I've said briefly, to the judge. Now, this is the same judge, Judge Anthony Says-Llewellyn, who you were at that case, Brian, in 2009, where, if you recall, I've sent you the letter off and you've had a look at it, where he allowed deliberate perjury by the barrister representing Neath Talbot Council. He also would not allow 5 elected councillors to speak on Linda Lewis's behalf. The last response we had from him was a couple of months back. He has not responded to the last letter that we had. He's basically ignored it. But he has come back, and this is quite remarkable. There only seems to be one judge now who is prepared to act on behalf of the Welsh Assembly Labour government and block everything and cover up for them, and this is the guy Anthony Says-Llewellyn. He actually, in one sentence, came back to Linda and said that he is questioning now the authenticity of Linda's evidence. Now, how can you question the authenticity of any evidence put into court when it comes from the Welsh Assembly government directly and it's signed by ministers, when it comes from the Welsh Assembly Social Services Inspectorate, who signed by the head of Social Services at that time? How can you question the authenticity of a document that is signed by the head of Legal Services in Neath Talbot Council? It's absolutely amazing. They have nothing left to play with apart from obstructing, which is Linda's right, and that is basically an innocent mother who's been falsely accused of going to murder her daughter. It's absolutely incredible. And yet this guy, Brian, you'll recall in 2009, when the evidence was going into court, had no problem with its authenticity then, because the decision had already been made to place an injunction to gag us from speaking out about criminal acts.
Kevin, thank you very much for that update. We are going to be covering more on this subject, and as a result of our recent interview with former social worker Carol Woods, we've had a lot more contact about cases of child stealing by the state, and we will give you more time to talk about Linda's case. Well, let's move on to Tata Steel, which of course is a big subject in your area. Very interested in this Guardian report here, which was at least asking one of the key questions. If we spent billions of pounds bailing out the banks, why can't the state bail out the steel industry? And they put some statistics, which you can see on screen here, about how much it would cost to bail out Tata Steel versus the banks. Quite a lot of text around this article, but at least that question appeared. But we've got some other questions to ask around what was going on. And of course, Tata Steel was boasting of its support for local Welsh communities. This is one of their publications. Now, we discovered, of course, that Common Purpose was working to help Tata expand a new plant in Orissa, India, and it was supporting the Indian local communities. But of course, it now appears that that was all being done at the expense of British jobs in South Wales. Why are we so interested? Well, let's follow it through. Here's the European head of Tata Steel, David Landsman. He's in fact an ex-British government man, and he was saying, amongst other things, that his job was to bring some unity and common purpose to this sprawling steel conglomerate. Well, let's bring in your local man. Here he is, Stephen Kinnock, because according to a number of reports, he's been with the union over in India begging, this is the word, we are now at the stage where British MPs beg on behalf of the good men and women in South Wales who are going to be made redundant. So Stephen Kinnock begging Tata Steel to keep the job plan. But it's very strange that when cpexposed.com started to expose the dirty dealings of political charity Common Purpose, the Julia Middleton chief executive begged Stephen Kinnock's mum, Glynis, for help. Please help us, because those nasty people are showing what we're doing. So there we are. We've got what we're calling the magic circle, Common Purpose, working with Tata Steel to destroy South Wales jobs. And if anybody doubts what we're putting up on screen, here is a copy of the letter, and you can read for yourself that Julia Middleton was really upset that that nasty Brian Gerrish, and she mentioned Roger Helmer as well, but he didn't do very much, but David Noakes as well. Those nasty people were starting to ask, what on earth is her charity doing? So here we are. We've got the Tata Steel plants being shut down, but at least the Spectator picked up on something sensible, because it said, isn't it interesting that the costs for Tata Steel in UK are extremely high due to the green energy policy, and Mr. Kinnock doesn't want to challenge that. So this was part of the thing. He doesn't want to deal with the reality of what's partly crippling business interests, but he doesn't want to go begging. So against that background, Kevin, what is actually the view in the local community?
Well, there's a lot of people obviously very worried, very concerned, and most importantly, very angry as to what's going on. Regarding the high costs for production in Port Talbot with energy, Stephen Kinnock won't address that, because it was the Labour Party and Ed Miliband specifically came in with the green tariffs, which hiked the cost of electricity and gas through the roof anyway. It's a very tense time down here at the moment with Port Talbot. There's a lot of conflicting interest coming out. Now, what's appeared in the press over the last couple of days, and this has got a lot of people very, very angry, not just the people directly involved and the families and the good people of Port Talbot, but certainly I've been in dialogue with Duncan Higgett and Beth Ann Jenkins AM, but apparently both the Welsh Assembly government and the main government in Westminster knew what Tata were going to do around about Christmas. Now, what has come out of this is that I know they've obviously been working on things for the last 3 months, but it seems to be in Wales certainly that the Labour Party has had a 3-month advantage to prepare some sort of exit strategy or face-saving strategy for, whatever's going to happen. Where Port Talbot is concerned, we have, David Rees, who I've already mentioned before, as the sitting AM on a constituency basis in Aberavon, which includes Port Talbot. But we also have the Dehont system down here, where we have 4 different assembly members who cover the region. Now, not one of them were informed that, they've been going around doing their job, but not having full knowledge, Brian. And that includes, I think it's Conservative, Labour, Plaid Cymru, and maybe, who's the other one, a Liberal. Who have not had full knowledge of what was going on in the steelworks. And it does make this all look a little bit theatrical when, people have been saying, oh, well, why wasn't the business secretary in Mumbai? Well, why would he go to Mumbai if the decision had been ready made in December? What was Stephen Kinnock there? Was he there on a mission of mercy just to save face and say, hey, guys, look at me. I'm your local MP. I'm going there. I know what the outcome is. It's a damn waste of time. But hey, look at me, I'm giving myself an exit strategy for when the worst happens. So, what we've got in South Wales is the usual thing of the left leg blaming the right leg and the right leg blaming the left leg, when both of them are actually giving a big kick in the face to the workforce in Port Talbot.
Kevin, thank you very much for that. We will do some more investigation as well on that little circle. And as has been pointed out in the chat room, that Stephen Kinnock's Danish wife, former Prime Minister of Denmark, was bringing in green energy policies in Denmark, causing problems. So these are internationalists. He's certainly not working, in my opinion, for the best of the Welsh people.
Well, he's not. He's the globalist, Brian. But, another article that's come up as well over the last couple of days is that Tata Steel itself has actually gone into bed with a Chinese bank. And that should explain a lot. Why,
Well, there's certainly a lot of getting into bed together. So Kinnock is obviously fully in bed with Denmark. Bring in the Chinese. We can also bring in Common Purpose, because Common Purpose training those Chinese leaders as well. Mike, Ian Crane, I think.
Yes, tonight, Ian Crane back in the studio, 7:30 p.m, Humanity versus Insanity. He's going to be speaking to Dr. Graham Downing, discussing the film, Andrew Wakefield's film, Vaxxed. And Graham Downing will be discussing data on autism and so on, so please join us for that. And then at 2100, 9 o'clock, Susan Gorman-Chang will be coming back on Fracking Nightmare, because the Porter Ranch, there have been developments at the Porter Ranch gas leak. It has now been identified by New York Times Magazine as being somewhere not quite as bad as Fukushima, but actually quite a bit worse than the Deepwater Horizon disaster. So that continues, and in the meantime, people are being forced back into their homes, despite the fact that the problem's never really been dealt with. So join us for those two programs tonight. Now we move on to, I suppose, what is occupying most of the mainstream press today, the Panama Papers. Several terabytes of big data, apparently supplied by someone to a German newspaper, this German newspaper, Süddeutsche Zeitung, and a network of secret offshore deals, vast loans, a law firm, the fourth largest offshore law firm in the world, Mossack Fonseca, and all kinds of shell companies, hiding identities, evading tax, and so on. So we're not really going to talk about the ins and outs of this story particularly, but some of the stuff that other people aren't discussing quite so much. The first victim, of course, has been Iceland, and the Icelandic Prime Minister resigned yesterday evening as a result. So the storm came, and
So they've got him then.
and he went. Yes, indeed. But he went not before calling the police and some journalists. So these were journalists from the Norwegian newspaper Aftenposten. And a journalist and a photographer had gone to his home to try to get some comment yesterday morning. This was before he had resigned. And the next thing they knew, the police were breathing down their necks and asking them to leave and so on. So he clearly didn't want any kind of publicity at that time. But anyway, I want to mainly focus on why this is happening, who's behind it. And as Cryptome points out here, the story is being managed. A large number of documents were released to the original newspaper, but now only a few are being publicized. So what's going on? The original recipient, the original German newspaper, effectively being cut out at this point. And this lot are managing this story from now on, the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. Well, who are they? Let's have a look. They've got an about page. And they say they were founded in 1997 as a project of the Centre of Public Integrity, and here they are. They also have a page, an about page for ICIJ for some reason, well, because it's their project, I guess. And it includes this little snippet, which isn't on the main website, the funders. And who have we got? The Odysseum Foundation, Open Society Foundations, the David and Lucille Packard Foundation, the Oak Foundation, the Pew Charitable Trust, and the Waterloo Foundation. So we have an organisation funded by multi-layered tax-exempt trusts and foundations publishing documents about shell companies and tax evasion.
And George Soros, of course, in the middle of that with Open Society Foundations.
So no hypocrisy there at all, but never once to miss a trick. The ICIJ attempts to divert everyone's attention onto guess who. There we go. And of course,
shall we say we need to say that for our listeners, Mike?
Vladimir Putin, of course, yes. And of course, The Guardian picked this up as well because they are linked to ICIJ as well. But quite a lot of the mainstream media picked up on this point. How do you hide away your cash in tax havens? So here we've got the FT talking about tax havens. We've got France 24 talking about tax havens. Well, indeed, some people tweeting about tax havens as well and saying, well, these documents are only about one tax haven. This is the tip of the iceberg. Well, I'd just like to remind you of what we published in 2013, because, of course, in 2013, we had the first bite of this cherry, which was Google not paying their corporation tax, Google and others. And we said at the time that the agenda for Bilderberg 2013 was big data and the global tax regime. So have a look at this short clip, and this was the part of the interview that we did with Michael Meacher at Bilderberg in 2013.
Bear with me on this one. The UK column says, for example, that they will ostensibly appear to support like a corporate profit tax. Eric Schmidt, the head of Google, has been consorting with the government because Google had a summit here at the Grove Hotel right before Bilderberg. And what they say is there's like a sleight of hand that goes on. In other words, they'll say, we need a corporate tax and they'll get the people riled up to say, yes, we got to tax those nasty corporations, but then they can avoid it through their clout and through their loopholes, and then the tax will be settled down on the small businessman, the middle class, the lower classes. In other words, they don't exactly avoid taxes, they refit them for the rest of us. What do you think about that kind of sleight of hand?
I think that's very likely. I think they want to continue to avoid as much as they possibly can, but as a fallback, plan B, they'll do the kind of thing you've been talking about.
So the sleight of hand that Mark Anderson was asking about didn't work at the time. They've tried to ramp it up from time to time since. People didn't get angry enough then with Google and Amazon and Starbucks and whatnot. So they haven't managed to get this global tax infrastructure sorted out. Now they're having another go. The Panama Papers, if you want to, sorry, somebody commenting on this, by the way, was pointing out a couple of books on Twitter. Treasure Islands by Nicholas Shaxson. Another book was Planet Ponzi by Mitch Firestein. And the point that's was made in that tweet was the system is rigged in favor of the 1%. Well, the system is going to be rigged as a result of what we're seeing at the moment. The system is going to be rigged even more for the 1%. And if you want to know more about that, get onto the UK Column website, go to the sections menu there and have a look for the article series called One World Governance, an excellent series of articles by Martin Edwards that'll give you an impression of where this is going. Now, it's interesting that this particular PSYOP, and that's what I think it is the same MO that was used for Leveson. So if you remember, Max Mosley was the patsy for this one. It was effectively a false flag, I believe. And in this case, as I'm pointing out from this Evening Standard article here, one of the people that Max Mosley was apparently playing around with in his Nazi dungeon orgy was the wife of an MI5 officer. So this was all very strange, this whole situation. But as a result of it, we ended up with the whole campaign to push through state control of the press through Leveson. Now that agenda has failed utterly, and we've got to make sure that this one does as well, because the last thing we want is a global tax regime. But there is still some interesting information that has appeared nonetheless. And of course, the British government right at the heart of this, as WikiLeaks points out with this little graph, which comes from the documents that have been released so far. The United Kingdom right at the top of the list, with Hong Kong, which of course ex-UK colony, still contains a lot of the old British financial infrastructure.
That is quite a graph, Mike, isn't it? Because you look down for the United States that's listed there as number 4. You would have thought with the volume of money circulating in the States that they'd be way out in front, but no.
Absolutely. And whereas all the focus has been on certain Middle Eastern leaders and Putin, we should highlight this little excerpt. Ian Cameron, the father of David Cameron.
Surely not, Mike.
A stockbroker and multimillionaire until he passed away in 2010. He was a client of this law firm, and he used the law firm to shield his investment fund, which was called Blairmore Holdings, Inc. Blairmore Holdings, Inc. I'm fascinated by that. From UK taxes. What else was he doing? Nobody knows. But of course, there have to be some patsies, and there has to be anger over this. And this is pretty much the same MO, Brian, as MP's expenses, as to the child abuse situation. It is used to encourage anger and frustration in people. They'll get what they want out of it, and then they'll shut it all down.
Yeah, but the aim is global tax.
Global tax.
Global tax. Probably we need a judge to look into. I'd appoint a judge, preferably New Zealand one. Sure, she'd have it cracked open in no time at all. Patrick Henningsen.
Well, actually, Vanessa Beeley.
Okay.
So just want to highlight this article, new article by Vanessa on the 21st Century Wire website. Please go and read it. UN whitewashing Saudi coalition war crimes. And of course, she was in Switzerland presenting to the United Nations a couple of weeks ago. So this is, she is writing for some authority. She ends up by saying it's almost impossible not to conclude that multiple parties are colluding to starve Yemen into submission to Saudi objectives that are aligned with those of the US, NATO, and Israel. And anybody wants to meet Vanessa, please go to AV7, of course, or she'll be speaking at Frome a week after that. and we'll have full details of the Froome talk shortly. But AV7 is your first opportunity to meet her.
Excellent. Just very briefly, Kevin, what do we say? How do we get this message over that really Britain is being governed by just corrupt criminals? Isn't that the truth of it?
Well, yes, absolutely, totally corrupt people, seriously corrupt people. But, I've been speaking to quite a few people again, Brian, as I've said, and there is one simple solution that will guarantee the poor steelworks in Port Talbot and in other places and full employment. And of course, what we need to be pushing on this is the Bradbury Pound. If we had the Bradbury Pound, we wouldn't be in this mess.
Thank you very much for that. And of course, that's why the government at the moment is desperate not to talk about the Bradbury at all. And exactly the same with the Labour Party, even though 4 of its members signed the early day motion saying that the Bradbury was a good idea. Now that Mr. Corbyn's team apparently don't want to talk to us anymore. Well, that's the big picture. Let's come on to the streets of London. And we've got to give credit to, even more credit to Sam, the blogger. Here he is. He's been posting some very interesting videos. This was the latest one, Back in the Line of Fire. What really comes out of this little sequence, I've just taken some stills, but the British police seem to be losing their ability to think for themselves. They're so terrified of this terrorist threat. What is that, ISIS, or is it al-Nusra, or is it Free Syrian Army? I'm not too sure. It's very confusing, but David Cameron knows, apparently. So let's have a look. Well, this is what Sam was doing. He went to take a few videos of those nice soldiers on their horses, horse guard parade type thing, which of course many other people and tourists go specifically to take photographs and video. But the police didn't like Sam videoing, and it got quite heated. So even though other people were clearly videoing, this is what Sam had to endure, which was an interrogation by the police, heavily armed, of course. They wanted to know what he was doing. He said, I'm videoing. Everybody else is videoing. Please go and watch this, because as an example that the police seem to have had their brains stripped out. But one of the things said by the gentleman in the central in the picture is the reason we're asking for your details is because we're asking you to account for your actions. But what Sam had been doing was videoing, which a big crowd of other people were also videoing.
Yes, but aside from that, the policeman is asking Sam to account for his actions.
Yeah.
I thought it was the public held the police to account for their actions, and our MPs and so on. We seem to have a reversal of roles here.
Well, we do. This is why this video is just well worth watching. Back in the Line of Fire. Go and have a look. And Sam, you're doing a great job. You stay out there getting these video clips, because of course it shows the police for what they have become. Not all of them, but many. And we just remind you, this is the sort of thing that Greater Glasgow Police, well, of course that's not true, is it? Because they're Police Scotland. None of the local Scottish police divisions exist anymore. But they're saying, think before you post, or you may receive a visit from us at the weekend. So if they pick on you because they don't like you, you can't video, even though there's no law against videoing, and other people are videoing. And if you post anything a bit nasty, then they've got the resources to get you. They haven't got the resources to pick up those VIP paedophiles, but they can knock on your door. Go and have a look at this Twitter page, because under this particular tweet was a comment which I liked a lot, but unfortunately it used very bad language, which included off, and was directed at Greater Manchester Police. Credible stuff. So where is this new policing style coming from? Well, we just thought we'd come back to Common Purpose, because here is Common Purpose, and they're collabing. They're running a collaboration with Avon and Somerset Constabulary. Common Purpose runs leadership development programs across the UK that inspire and equip people to work together and across boundaries, except, of course, if you happen to be working in Tata Steel in South Wales, where Common Purpose has been working to make sure you haven't got a job. Kevin, 5 minutes to go. Brief comment, if you like, on the police, because you've been experiencing the police in the Linda Lewis case, haven't you?
Well, when we saw the police, I think, I've forgotten when it was, Brian, I think it was last year when Bethan Jenkins AM and Duncan Higgett and Linda and myself had a visit, we found them very good, very sympathetic indeed. But looking at what Sam the blogger's doing and things there, it's quite interesting because a friend of mine from Port Talbot, he's got a mate who's in traffic with South Wales Police, and he said, quite off the cuff, not deliberately, he said that they've stopped stopping so many drivers these days because they're getting videoed too many times, and it's getting a little bit difficult for them. It's also good to know that people are saying, I'm not actually the driver of the car, I'm under common law, and I am a traveller, which means I'm exempt from any commercial process that you're trying to enforce on me. So, things are coming in. The police force is still a little bit of an enigma in South Wales. After that meeting, we did say, when Bethan and Duncan and Linda were there, that we were going to be looking at taking legal action over the false claim of Linda being arrested. They did come back with an explanation and say an apology to say that they were never arrested, but it's quite funny. A month later, Linda got a letter from a chief superintendent in South Wales, literally begging her not to do anything by saying that they've never done anything wrong. So it was a little bit confusing that. Why would they come back and say they've never done anything wrong before they've actually been accused? I mean, we know historically they have done, but certainly for the time being, is it worth taking the Linda Lewis case to South Wales Police? We don't know, but certainly the police that we have dealt with have been very reasonable indeed. And it's nice to know that on the QT somebody else admitted that the police force is not the problem. They can go on the evidence. The problem here is the CPS, who are protecting the paedophiles and the criminals in power, not the police.
Right. Well, we'll watch how things develop there in South Wales and elsewhere in the UK. And of course, we're going to keep saying that we do get a lot of help from people in Britain's police forces. So it isn't all of them, but of course they have to understand what's being done within their own organisations. Well, let's end on a piece of news that isn't really news, but maybe it is. This is The Guardian. And they followed BBC Radio 5, who's been investigating. And Mike, do you know, BBC has discovered that local councils have been using what's called compromise agreements to buy people off when they've discovered something wrong. So you sack them, they get annoyed, they decide to take you to court or tribunal. So you buy them off with a huge sum of money called a compromise agreement, which includes a gagging order. And apparently, although this has been widely known for at least the last 5 years, BBC Radio 5's only just discovered it. And they're getting very upset because apparently there's been 17,571 compromise agreements by council local authorities in UK. And the figure is about 200 million of public money spent, but nothing on how much the BBC has spent on buying off people who are exposing what's going on.
I think compromise agreements are pretty standard fare in the public sector these days. Since the BBC is sort of semi-public sector, they behave the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. So never mind the criminality in Westminster, never mind the child stealing and abuse. The good old BBC's discovered that somebody else is doing things wrong. So that's the local councils. A little bit jealous, yeah. Well, that ends today's news. Kevin, thank you very much for joining us. And as promised, we will have you back for more detail on the Linda Lewis child stealing case. And we would certainly like further updates on what's happening around Tata Steel and the Kinnocks. Somebody said Stephen Kinnock resided in Switzerland.
Don't know.
Wasn't that one of the top of your corruption lists, I think, on that little diagram? Yeah. Probably was.
The World Economic Forum for tax reasons.
Go on, just say that again so that we get you on screen.
Stephen Kinnock lived in Geneva when he was chairman of the World Economic Forum purely for tax reasons.
Okay.
Tax avoidance reasons.
Tax reasons. How interesting. Thank you very much for that. That ends today's news. Thank you all very much for joining us. If you like what we do, we need your help by subscriptions or donations. We can only do what we do with that continuing support. So if you're not yet signed up to UK Column, please consider doing it or helping in any way you can. And the last comment is that we've had a very, very good response to the interviews with Carol Woods, that very brave social worker who blew the whistle on that she'd been told to falsify documents so that children could be stolen from their parents. We've had a lot of responses over the weekend, and I had an excellent chat with a lady in New Zealand on that very subject. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back same time tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye-bye.